As I'm recording this, I literally just saw this rumor, like, just now. And so I immediately went here. I actually had planned to do a video, like a very different video, actually a couple of different videos today, but here we are. It's been like a week break, maybe a little bit over that, 9 or 10 days. So we're talking about this rumor that says the Timberwolves would prefer to trade out of the #1 pick or trade down to bring in a win now player to fit next to Towns and D'Angelo Russell. So I think, in my honest opinion, this is just a mistake. Unless you know that the team that is drafting #1 is going to take Wiseman or Edwards, because you want LaMelo Ball. You being the Timberwolves franchise, like the management, you yourself, which I disagree with, have said that you missed out on Jarrett Culver and have to hit on this draft. Okay, with that said, you then have to draft LaMelo Ball. That's your only choice. Unless you trade down to 7 or 8, you have to draft LaMelo Ball. He will undoubtedly be the best player from this draft class, and I'm gonna make a whole video on this draft because I honestly don't think it's as weak as people make it out to be. I think it is just perceived that way because we have not seen March Madness because, you know, the whole pandemic. Anyways, I'm getting off track. So, if they're gonna trade down, they need to be 100% sure that the team that is going to draft at #1 will not take LaMelo Ball. Because even though LaMelo Ball does not necessarily fit next to Towns or Russell, you have to draft him because he will be, there's no question, LaMelo Ball will be the best player from this draft class, and I have a top 3 in mind, and like I said, I'll make a whole separate video on that. And if drafting LaMelo Ball means you have to trade D'Lo, then do it. I know that Towns and D'Lo are friends, but there's an old saying that says make your teammates your friends, not your friends your teammates. And it holds true today, and it will hold true 100 years from now, because that will always be the case. Now, everybody loves to play with their friends. Everybody loves being teammates with their friends. That doesn't necessarily contribute to winning. So I could find a better example, but it wouldn't be a basketball example. But the first one within the NBA comes to mind is the Rose, Noah, Carmelo, Porzingis. Actually, I don't think Porzingis would have been there at the time. That whole bunch, they were all supposed to be friends with each other and were supposed to be a super team. And yeah, injuries happen. Rose wasn't really his normal self. Noah had slowed down a little bit, but I mean, that's just the first example I thought of. Those guys were all friends, and they were supposed to be a super team. The Knicks were supposed to have 50 wins, and they ended up with the 5th or 6th pick. I'd have to check that. That team also had Brandon Jennings, and they went 31 and 51 and finished 12th in the Eastern Conference. They also had the 8th pick in the draft. That was the draft they drafted Frank Ntilikina, who was Derrick Rose's replacement because that fit obviously didn't work. Now, they were supposed to be a 50-win team, and they ended up being a team with 50 losses, and they were all friends, and we were all told they would be a super team. Now, yes, injuries did happen, but that is the most recent case that I can think of where a team of friends grouped up together to form a super team, and it failed miserably. There's probably some other examples, but they're just not coming to my mind right now. So, yeah. I mean, so let's look at it now. Towns is locked into a deal. After the end of the deal, if the Timberwolves haven't made the Western Conference Finals or haven't won a chip, Towns is leaving. That's it. Like, me as a Timberwolves fan, I can accept that. And even if we win, there's still a very likely chance that Towns will leave, because no Minnesota Timberwolves player stays there for their entire career, even with success. So, with that said, if trading D'Lo makes Towns unhappy, whatever. Like, he's locked into a deal. You don't have to trade him. And there's a very recent memory that comes to mind where a player asked to be traded, but the team didn't have to trade him. And that was the New York Knicks in the Porzingis trade. They did not have to trade Porzingis. They didn't. And it's been said that the reason they did that, and I think we can all kind of see this, was to free up space to sign Katie and Kyrie. which, I mean, that didn't happen. And to tank to get Zion. That did not happen. And now the Knicks are where they are now. They're the laughing stock of the NBA, and no one takes their franchise seriously, and no one wants to come to New York because there's no culture there. Not only is there no culture there, but you have possibly one of the worst owners in the NBA. And look, man, the Timberwolves aren't like a prestigious franchise or anything like that. But we're better than the Knicks. And I'd argue that we're better than the Clippers because we've spent more time in the Western Conference Finals than they have in 7 years as a franchise compared to our 31 now. But anyways, I think we should talk about what happens if they draft LaMelo. Well, I think LaMelo's rookie season will probably, I'd say, puts up 15-7 on not bad efficiency for a rookie, decent efficiency for a rookie. 15-7. I'd say if Okogie takes another step in his game, we re-sign Malik Beasley, Jarrett Culver takes that next step in his game, I think we're a borderline, we're the 8th or the 9th seed, possibly the 7th seed, depending on what other teams in the Western Conference do. You obviously know that the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors, they're going to be in the picture next year. And after that, we don't really know because there's rumors that the Jazz will trade Gobert, and I don't want to get into that right now. I'll probably make a whole separate video on what the Western Conference will look like next season. I might wait till after the offseason to make that video, though. Maybe I'll do a video on like the potential moves they could have. But anyways, moving on from that. What happens if they trade down and someone else drafts LaMelo at number 1? And let's say we trade down, what's the most likely scenario? Who would want to draft at number 1? I think the Bulls could. Because, yeah, they have Kobe White, but, I mean, if they take, like, I think LaMelo has I think everybody in the league knows that LaMelo has the highest potential out of everybody else in this draft class. I think everyone around the league, as far as, like, front office goes, knows that LaMelo Ball has the highest potential out of everybody else in this draft class. And if the Bulls know that, I mean, you have Wendell Carter Jr., one of the best defensive young players in the NBA right now. Obviously, Simmons is in that conversation, and then some other players that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. You have Markkanen at the 4, which, I mean, hopefully this season was a fluke just because he didn't thrive as well in Jim Boylan's system as he did Fred Hoiberg's system, or whoever was the coach before. I think it was Fred Hoiberg. That's besides the point. But you also think they might want Denny Avdia because I think, do they have Otto Porter? Is that their small forward? I'll have to check that. Yeah, Otto Porter is their small forward, and he is making a ton of money. But even with that said, I think we have the room in our cap space to take on Otto Porter. So a trade for the Bulls getting the number 1 pick, and then we drop down to 4, and we get Otto Porter back. I'm honestly okay with that because they can draft LaMelo, keep Kobe White at the point, and then move him to the small forward. I mean, LaMelo's 6'7", and it's positionless basketball anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I guess you could play LaMelo at center if you really wanted to, although I don't think that would be a good idea. But you could do it. Just saying, it's positionless basketball, like I said. So, yeah, and then we get Otto Porter. But who would you draft at number 4? So by then you would have to assume that Edwards and Wiseman are off the board, and that leaves Okongwu. That leaves Obi Toppin. That leaves, I wouldn't know. Okoro. Now, that could be interesting if we don't bring Malik Beasley back, because then we have Okoro at the shooting guard. I would say I would rather, and this is 4, so we'd have to, like, we'd be reaching, like, from somebody in the late lottery at 4, which I'm fine with because I'm very confident in these 2 players, and those players would be Onyeka Okongwu, who you could put next to Towns at the 4, and Isaac Okoro. And I think if you have Okogie at the small forward, or actually you might have Otto Porter. I think if you have Okoro and Okogie in at some points, like, I think that could just totally hide D'Lo or, and the biggest flaw with the Timberwolves is obviously the defense. Like, they don't have, other than Culver and Akoji, you don't really have that many defensive guys, unless Town makes a big jump defensively next year, which I think he could. I think he could. That all depends on him and the effort he's willing to put in. And we just simply can't predict that. Now, let's say we draft a Koro. We have Otto Porter starting. We keep Culver and we keep Akoji, and we draft Isaac Okoro. I think we're a 45-win team with that lineup, depending on what pieces we add to our bench. Now, what if we draft a Kongwu? If everything works out and Towns doesn't take a defensive jump, we're like 8th, 9th seed in the West, depending on what other teams do. It's also important to note that the Mavericks are going to be better next season. How much better, we don't exactly know that yet, but we don't really know that with any other teams, really. So, I don't know. In order for Minnesota to slide into the playoffs in the Western Conference, somebody has to take a step back. Like, the Utah Jazz have to take a step back, the Nuggets have to take a step back, the Trailblazers would have to take a step back. One of those teams would have to take a big step back, and we would have to get better, which I think we are going to get better, especially if we trade down in the draft for assets. Now, I think if we did that, it would hurt us in the long run because we'd be losing out on future star LaMelo Ball. So it's tough. It really is. So would I rather have us trade down and get assets, or would I rather have us draft LaMelo Ball and we maybe stagnate, or we have to trade D'Angelo Russell? Yes, I would rather do that. I would rather get rid of D'Angelo Russell, potentially make Towns upset for LaMelo Ball. That is how much I value LaMelo Ball. And when you look at it from a business side, I don't want to get too much into this, but you remember in the bubble, like before the pre-bubble, there was a rumor. I think Shaq started it and said that teams were looking to move to Las Vegas. And there were a handful of teams that were looking to move to Las Vegas. And you have to think, man, they're not going to move a team that has good attendance. So who was last in attendance this season? Well, it was the Minnesota Timberwolves. So we need someone to play for us who can sell tickets. And you could make the argument that Towns was out most of the year, so that's why our ticket sales were down by a lot. But still, man, I think we need to secure our spot in the NBA for the next 10 years. Because if Minnesota loses their basketball team, I don't know, man. I like baseball and everything, but I don't know if I can watch the Twins for 100-something games or however many they play in the MLB. Do we get into possible D'Lo trades this video? Nah, I think this video is already long enough as it is. I'll probably make a separate video on that. But yeah, that's all from me. See you in the next video.